Hey everyone, welcome back to the new episode of the Dreamers Podcast. Today with me I have Hales, a digital artist. If you kind of want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Haley, but I do go by Hales. At least most of you probably know me as Hales. um, I hate the term, but I consider myself a multiple disciplinary artist.
Nice. So then kind of talk about your journey. I mean, we kind of talked a little beforehand about how you're now in film school, but you also do, a ton of
hmm
digital art and a lot of different styles and formats, and I'll kind of get into that later, but kind of talk about how you started your art journey in general.
I started doing art, I feel like professionally in middle school. I went to a arts performing and visual middle school back in Houston, Texas, is where I'm from originally. And I had a lovely art teacher there who basically just helped me realize that art was a potential path, like career path. Um, and from middle school, I went to a performing arts high school where I trained under a bunch of just like amazing, like either award winning professors. I consider them professors based on their credentials, even though they were just teachers then. Um, but like award winning professors. And I slowly started making like video essays and video journals. Um, that kind of brought me into this film world. I used to love writing. In middle school, actually, I wrote like a 60-page short story. And like in middle school, you're 12. And I was writing something that was like 60 pages on my own. And I was like trying to get every one of my English teachers to read it. Like, please look over it. It's going to be the next best thing, right? And I actually recently reread it and it's terrible, but but
Yeah, that,
for a middle schooler, it's 60 pages. It's kind of impressive, right?
yeah.
Um,
hmm
but yeah, I always had this like love and affinity for storytelling. So naturally, when I was in high school and making those like video essays and video collages, it just kind of formulated in, man, I should go to film school. So now I'm out in Atlanta, Georgia, majoring in film and television and minoring in dramatic writing, which is like scripts and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the journey. I mean, if you want to go way, way back, when I was just a young kid, my dad and my mom, my uncles, they all drew. So I feel
hmm
like that's probably the beginning of it is I was in around art my entire life, basically. So
hmm
that's where you get the little bit of the digital media, you get the painting, you get the video, and, you can kind of see
hmm
all of that journey on my page.
So yeah, that is pretty impressive to write a 60-page little story in middle school. I was like, if we had to write like 2 pages for class, I was not, I was like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. But here you are writing, 30 times that for
Yeah.
fun. So that's cool. I didn't even know they had art schools, like middle schools. I just thought it was like a high school or, obviously college thing. So
hmm
that's really interesting. How has Houston, or I guess like the whole Texas area, um, kind of how has that played an influence on maybe not even just your art or your films, but just you as a person? Would you say?
It's an interesting city because most people, especially if you're just familiar with Texas in general, wouldn't consider Texas an art place.
hmm
It's more so like Austin. Austin is the art city, basically, and Houston is just
hmm
kind of like that mixing pot of everything else. Sure, we got our
hmm
rappers, sure we got our singers. We'll shout out Beyonce. Um, but especially for like visual mediums, it's never been that popular, especially not in the same way Atlanta has. But regardless, it's one of those things where you got to look a little deeper to find those artists out in Houston, especially those visual artists. Um, Houston and Galveston. Galveston's about like a hour and 30 minutes away from Houston, and
hmm
you have that like old traditional painter kind of inspiration going on. And in Houston, you might think of like Rothko. That's a name that we get a lot out there, which is like a classical or traditional experimental painter. And
hmm
I didn't know that Houston had so much art until I was surrounded by it. Like as a kid, I didn't know,
hmm
but when I went to middle school and we went on these field trips to different museums and stuff like that, you realize kind of that art that's within the city. And I mean, I think Houston itself is just shaped me in the like go-getter sense, like being a go-getter. You
Mm-hmm.
might hear the phrase Houston strong a lot. We had that like devastating winter, like blizzard kind of go through recently where,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
people died because they didn't know what the hell to do in the cold because we're down
Mm-hmm.
south. Um, but you also had a lot of people that were like working together to like keep people warm, keep people fed, driving on these icy roads and stuff like that. And that's kind of the mentality that Houston brings. Is just like helping each other and like being a go-getter, like working as hard as possible to make things happen. And I think you see that in a lot of the artists that come out of there too.
Say nice. I like that. You kind of said like, when you were a kid, you didn't really think of it as an art city or, having a lot, but then you kind of realized, oh, there's actually a ton going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool that you're able to kind of realize that and also talk about, the strength. It doesn't just inspire you from an artistic, but just, that drive, that attitude to go and get it and to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm in Kansas, so I'm a little bit above
Mm-hmm.
Texas. So it's not, we get the cold and the warm a little bit. So we're kind of used to that. But yeah, I had an online teacher that he was based in Texas when that was going on, and yeah, for like 2 weeks, we just had to cancel class because he was like, it was terrible with everything going on down there. So it was cool that you're able to kind of use that as an inspiration to kind of and drive to kind of reach your goals, and how people working together can really do so much and make a big impact. um, how would you compare it to Atlanta? You kind of talked about it in Georgia. What would be kind of the biggest difference from you going from Texas to there?
The big difference is Black culture. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think when everyone thinks Atlanta, they think Black culture. They think of every single rapper that's come out of here. They think of every single
Mm-hmm.
actor or movie that's being shot here currently. Um, we call Atlanta kind of Black Hollywood, basically, because that's where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Black productions are being like shot and gone on. We have Marvel movies shot here, and in
Mm-hmm.
comparison to Houston, Texas, not a lot of that is going on.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
Texas is about its oil, and that's about it. If just to keep it friendly, it's about its oil, and then
Uh-huh.
that's about it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but Atlanta is so much more richer in the sense that it's got 10 times more art than Houston. It's got
Mm-hmm.
the cultural background of just like Martin Luther King and all those like racial like leaders and stuff along those lines. It's like it's so rich. Like it's hard to describe it all in
Mm-hmm.
one sentence. It's just so rich with the amount of things that are going on. Like literally my school is right next to a church that has a film production going on, feels like every weekend. So we walk past giant cranes and stuff going on all the time with
Uh-huh.
big cameras, a bunch of extras just like lining the street, and it's insane.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't see a lot of that in Houston. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and even on the visual side, like I'm technically located in like a mini city. It's not exactly downtown Atlanta, but it's a little bit outside of downtown Atlanta. And
Mm-hmm.
you see murals, you see people like just it feels like a mini New York in a way. You see those posts about
Mm-hmm.
people in New York and they're wearing all these nice fashion things. Speaking of fashion, like the fashion industry here is insane.
Mm-hmm.
There's like so much going on, and like I said, in comparison to Houston, it's just not the same in the
Mm-hmm.
slightest.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I have not been to Atlanta yet. I definitely would love to go. I would consider it. A lot of people think of like New York for art and fashion, or LA for film. But like you said, Atlanta's got all of that going on. In big
Mm-hmm.
ways. So I think that's really cool that you're kind of able to go there and see how all this stuff is happening, and there's films being made right next to your
Mm-hmm.
school and all this stuff, things that I definitely don't see in Kansas, and I'm sure you didn't see in Texas. So I get that kind of a shock. And it's cool that you're able to uh, kind of figure out, like, this is a big epicenter of culture, and how much is, just so much is going on,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be films, clothing, just art in general. And Atlanta's definitely like on the top of like cities I'd want to visit in the U.S. list. So I mean, you kind of mentioned it. I think it was off air, but that you're graduating here soon. Do you? I mean, as a college grad myself, I know after graduation plans are always kind of like, oh, I don't know what's going on. But would you like to stay in the Atlanta area?
Yeah, for sure. One thing I don't know if I said yet, but I've met so many talented people. I talk about it all the time on my story, and I'm surrounded by so many talented people. Not
Mm-hmm.
to say that Houston and my lovely high school buddies back home aren't talented as here, but even when I was at school, they were so talented. A lot of them have moved out of Houston, um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I want to stay because I'm surrounded by who I need to be surrounded by. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends wants to start a magazine. I'm helping her support that. A few of them are trying to start their own small production companies, and I'm helping them helping them with that. And I like the city a little bit more than the suburbs, I gotta say, or the
Mm-hmm.
country life. And I'm a country girl at heart, but I gotta say I love the city a little bit more. There's always something
Mm-hmm.
happening. There's always an event. There's always a festival, whether that be art or music. And getting to be
Mm-hmm.
around that, it's what inspires me. It helps me create more things. It gives me more things to talk about it. Um, and being a part of that expression is fun. So I think I'm definitely going to stay in Atlanta.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like a pretty great place to stay. I mean, I love Kansas too, but I mean, I've said it on a ton of different episodes, but once I graduate, I'll probably, move to a bigger city because, yeah, like you said, I want to go to where there's like art festivals and museums and different things that I can go to all the time. Because, I mean, there's definitely art here and some really cool things, even like on a small scale, but I definitely would want to go to like a Chicago or maybe even Atlanta, something where there's always something happening, something fresh and like kind of inspire me with all that stuff. But then one thing I wanted to talk about is recently you did on your digital art page. I believe it was 38 days
hmm
straight of posting art of some kind every single day. So I wanted you to kind of talk about that and what inspired you to do that.
Yeah. Honestly, I was sitting in my room back at home, and I was just looking at all my social media friends and what they were posting and what they were doing. And I was talking to one of my buddies and colleagues, Sam, and I was just like, I kind of need to do more. Um, I had this just like intense drive and passion in me that was like, I've hit a plateau and I want to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And those 38 days was me pushing myself to create in either different mediums or creative mediums that I knew about, but I wanted to just like push myself in some way, shape, or form, work with other people, and just kind of like tick those boxes off because I felt myself at a plateau. I felt myself getting a little too comfortable in the good enough, and I wanted to push myself a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more. So it was right before school was about to start up again, and I was like, well, I'm just going to go as long as possible, make something every
Mm-hmm.
day, pull some mediums just out of nowhere and just keep going, keep going. So it kind of started from like just seeing what my friends were creating on the internet and then wanting to push myself more.
So awesome. I mean, you kind of mentioned it, but I mean, almost all the posts are completely different styles or formats. I mean, it's not just the same style, kind of the same general thing. It's all kinds of different styles and colors and concepts. So, what has led to you to have such a diverse style and being able to create art in such a wide variety of formats and mediums?
I gotta say, it's my background. It's that in middle school when shout out Miss Arsham because I just feel like I cannot say her name. Shout out Miss Arsham. Um, in middle school, I was told, hey, this assignment, do a painting. This assignment, we're gonna learn printmaking. This assignment, we're gonna, I don't know, make a collage. This assignment, we're gonna learn how to use Photoshop. Like I had all of those things, and I learned all of those things to the best of my ability. So if I made a Photoshop assignment or I did photography or anything, I tried my best to master it in a mini way. A lot of my friends like to call me the jack of all trades because they'll ask me, "Do you think you can do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I probably can," or I
Mm-hmm.
can probably figure it out. And in high school, I was learning printmaking, I was learning painting, I was learning digital media in the sense of like making digital collages, photography, film at its most basic forms, sculpture, like just a bunch of stuff. And I never wanted to limit myself to one thing because why,
Mm-hmm.
if you can do all these different things, I think it's more fun. It doesn't limit you.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in a way it's kind of anti Instagram, where you see kind of these artists that might get stuck in a pattern or a rut because the world knows them for that one thing. But I never really want to get
Mm-hmm.
stuck in that rut at all because that would suck for
Mm-hmm.
me personally. It's like these guys post and they want to do something else. They will type about it. They'll say in their captions, I'm kind of tired of doing these drawings, but this is what you guys
Uh-huh.
want. I'm like, that's not how you should live at all, not in the slightest.
Mm-hmm.
So
So yeah, that was something I actually talked about with one of the recent guests on the episode, and he said he was talking about there's certain art that will do well, like if he just draws pictures of
mm-hmm,
rappers in like a certain style that he likes, then he knows that that'll do well, and eventually he could get really big from that.
mm-hmm,
But he's like, I kind of don't want to keep doing that. Like that was my old style. I'm trying to do something new now, and so there's kind of that like you said, that anti Instagram kind of it's you versus the algorithm. So I like how you kind of pointed out that you should pick you
yeah.
always. I mean, that's definitely something that's really important. But I also just kind of wanted to ask, I mean, you said being the jack of all trades and having all those, I'm sure helped lead to not feeling burnt out because you're able to do so many different things. But whether it be during that 38 days or just in general, how do you kind of overcome any like art blocks, creative blocks?
I journal a lot, not only for art but just for my mental health in general. And I think something that happens when you get those art blocks, I call them kind of plateaus, is you feel like you're not expanding, or you're stuck because you can't expand or you think you can't expand. Um, but you kind of have to push yourself to expand. With my background of just been doing art for so long, I'm kind of just aware of the idea of sometimes you're going to make something and it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you get through those artist blocks is by continuing to make things, even if they do suck. So I write and I remind myself of all the things that I've like achieved in my past or the people who have seen my art. But I also just keep making things. I have a journal in my hand all the time. So my friends will see me doodling in the middle of class. And that they're not always good,
Uh-huh.
but it's something, and it's something that kind of reminds yourself that you can do art. You are good at it. Just keep doing it. Keep doing it. The second thing is, or third thing rather, is like being inspired. You have to look at other art to make that like your own art better. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's watching movies, whether that's reading books, whether that's looking at what your friends are doing on Instagram, whether that's looking through Pinterest, whatever it is, like you have to look at other art. You got to go to the museums. You got to learn about the people who came before you who were doing these things before you in order to make your stuff good and to also just improve and see what else is out there. Um, I probably do a scroll on Instagram for at least 10 minutes a day, and I have like my little favorites tagged because that's a fun new Instagram feature. And when
Mm-hmm.
I click on that, it's all of my friends and all the things that they're creating or all the creators that inspire me. And I scroll through that. I'm like, dang, I didn't know that was possible. Or that shirt's really cool. Maybe I could do a
Mm-hmm.
drawing like that. Or all right, pixel art is back. Like, let's do some pixel art. So I'm just like
Uh-huh.
scrolling and scrolling, and when you see all these things, it's helpful because it's inspiring, and you're like, okay, now I know what I want to make next. Now I know what I want to make next.
what you said kind of reminded me of a recent tweet I saw where it was a screenshot of a tweet. And it was from, I don't know, I think some like Dungeons and Dragons podcast or whatever. I don't know, something. And they just tweeted, and they're like, your first podcast is going to suck. Your first video is going to suck. And then there was a list, like your first story, and so on and so forth. Like, it's not going to, you're not just going to come out the gate, hitting home runs. It's going to take that drive and passion and that hard work and kind of, developing, whether it be even, one specific style or just kind of your whole, your jack of trades, being able to have all these available and, figuring out how to best use them when is important. Yeah. And then also, you said being inspired by other artists is a huge thing. And that's one thing that definitely, obviously all the artists and, musicians and people I follow, push me to do it every day. And then, even just going on my, the Explore page on Instagram, like I could just go on the Explore page and it's just like all these crazy artists, doing, the most insane illustrations, 3D renders. And I'm just like, wow, like I could just sit there and like follow and like people all day. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff. And I think that's one of the best things about Instagram or social media is that you can really see what people are doing. And it can obviously be used as something where, if you don't have that positive thinking, you're like, oh, I can't do this. I can never do this. So that mindset is definitely something I think is important as well. But I think once you get past that, you can definitely use it as something like, oh, they can do this. Well, I can do this too. So let me try it. And, like we said, it's not going to be great at the beginning. It might not be great the second time or the third time, but that fifth time might be insane. The 10th time might be even better than that original piece. So I think, consistency and positive thinking is a big thing. And then I also wanted to talk about, related to that is, you got some of your art was based on different musicians and other artists and stuff. And they kind of noticed you or liked it or commented. So I was curious, like with Tobey and some of the other artists, how did that feel to kind of get that, recognition from them seeing your pieces?
Yeah. That was so much fun. Especially cause Tobe, I love Tobe. I say that from my chest, although I'm not yelling it. He, especially with him, because he's very for the culture and for the community. He's from Houston. So kind of having that connection. Once I got that first comment and repost and DM, I told my mom and she like went insane because we like love this man, love his music. And he recently did a Netflix show and it's just like, he was like shooting at a Shipley's down the street from my house, right? Back in Houston. So getting that recognition is like insane, but it's also a reminder to keep going. Keep working. A lot of them who did recognize or support or repost or comment were like, this is sick, like keep making more stuff, basically. And a lot of them have extended kind of a branch that says, hey, when you're done doing this or when you're done with school, let me know what you're up to so we can maybe link up and like chat and stuff like that, which is insane to think about. Because I think sometimes we forget that, these artists and these musicians, they're people too. And when you get to talk to them on that kind of level, it's like, damn, like you see me, I see you kind of situation.
So yeah, I think that's one thing that I've learned recently is that how, I guess, small the world is in a sense. Like how, I'm still a small page, but I've had, some posts liked by bigger artists or people that are doing insane things. And I was like, a year ago when I didn't have the page, I was like, maybe they'd see my DM and say, thanks for liking my stuff. But now it's like, oh, I know this guy who knows this person. And like, I'm, I guess like, 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from so many huge artists. And it's crazy to think about, like how, just small scale, like posting, even not being like a big page, how, just tagging them and getting some of your friends to like and tag them can get them to see your stuff. And like you said, extend that olive branch that could lead to, something in the future that could lead to something else. And it's just a big snowball effect. And so that's something that I think is really big that people just kind of, especially when they're trying to grow an online following, I think worry too much about, oh, I got to get so many followers and so many likes. But I mean, there's people that, have a few hundred followers on Instagram, but, in real life,
Mm-hmm.
they have, they're doing crazy deals and all this stuff with, large names. So I think it's important to kind of realize the pros and cons and kind of the differences between the big following versus actually being able to do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So it's cool that
I would love to piggyback on that.
Mhm.
I kind of said his name earlier, but the internet probably knows him better as Reno. Is
Mhm.
a guy I've been working with, Sam, and I have to piggyback off of that because I think another part of that like internetness and Instagramness is you have to be real. And he is one of the most real people that I see on the internet, and he is my buddy, and I
Mhm.
love him to death. Um, and it you gotta just keep doing that. Like, in order to
Mhm.
grow, in order to do literally anything in life, you kind of have to be yourself as much as Instagram or the internet wants to tell you not to be. Um, but yeah, you gotta be yourself.
Mhm. So yeah, shout out Reno. I've also been a big fan and following him for a long time. And yeah, I totally agree. He's one of the most real people. I mean, I'm not as active as I would like to be in like his Discord, but he's there and he's always showing love to people and giving advice. And I have talked to him in the past about being on the show, and so hopefully I'm going to try to set up something soon because he's someone that I would love to pick his brain and really see because I think he's one of the most interesting artists and people I follow, and he's still so young and has already done so much. I know the next 10 years he's going to be
Insane.
huge. He's going to be huge. So shout out Reno. And then I also wanted to mention in one of your posts, I believe or I guess there was two or three related to kind of products.
Mm-hmm.
You did like the denim lope, like the hat with ears. You did like the cloud shoes. So I'm curious as to in the future if that's something that you would like to get into, whether it be clothing or something else entirely, but any type of like physical products.
Yeah. I've always had a little bit of my hand in the fashion world, and honestly, working with Sam is how I've had more of a hand in it. I've done
Mm-hmm.
a lot of just like digital designs that people can put on T-shirts and something along those lines. But with making my own stuff, it's always been trying to think a little more innovative, like doing something a little different. With the hat, for example, I was like, I kind of want my own ear hat. Like that's just kind of a thing right now, having the
Mm-hmm.
cat ears or the
Mm-hmm.
bunny ears or something along those lines. And I was like, well, I want to make one for myself. And so I have what I call the denim lop. And, the fun part about that project was coming up with the idea, actually physically sewing it myself, and then getting my younger sister, to shoot the pictures for the poster design that I made for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and same thing with the shoes. Like, I always considered my like fashion-esque brand called Cloudy. That's with three
Mm-hmm.
eyes. For why, I don't know, but three eyes. Um, and the shoes are the same deal. I made some like Air Force Ones kind of a while ago. It's like one of the first things on my art page. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, I want to do another rendition of a shoe. And we got these like I can't remember who did it. I don't know if it's Adidas. They're like kind of ones that look like a golf ball. Is it Adidas that did that?
Yeah, I want to say it's
Okay,
Adidas. I think so.
we'll correct ourselves later if it isn't
Uh,
Adidas. Um, but we've seen that kind of like new 3D shoe form shape, and I was like, I kind of want to do something like that, but a
mm-hmm.
little more me. And so I did that like fluffy cotton ball cloud um, shoe, and literally it's me going to Goodwill, finding an old pair of shoes, putting cotton balls on them, making it look
Mm-hmm.
as cloud-like as possible, and then taking those pictures again with my little sister, throwing them in the air so I could get the right picture at the right time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, products is something I'm definitely interested in getting a little more into. Um, like I said at the top of this, I consider myself multidisciplinary, but I think my core things or my core interests are fashion, storytelling, and music. which is like music. Whoa, where did that come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, those are my core things, and I'm interested in kind of like branching into those things as well.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we've talked about a little bit of the storytelling at the start of the interview. We just talked about the fashion. We kind of talked about inspiration
Mm-hmm.
from some of those musicians and stuff. But now, I mean, you mentioned being in film school.
Yeah.
We got to talk about the movie Off the Field. You want to kind of give a brief overview about that and how that came to be?
Yeah, so as I'm in my senior year of college, you get to make a capstone. And to kind of like sum that up for people who would know what that is, it's like, I feel like for normal schools, you might have like the big presentation or the big paper. But for me, I get to make
Mm-hmm.
a film. And this is like the final film that I get to make. And something that I realized while being at film school is like, while I love writing scripts and telling narratives and kind of creating these characters and worlds that gets to exist, I really, really love telling other people's stories. Um, Last spring, I took a documentary class with a several time Emmy winning, several time Emmy nominated professor. And
Whoa.
she she like kind of changed my world around, because here I was ready to go
Mm-hmm.
into the film industry, be a PA, lift some sandbags and put some things on trucks and stuff like that, and work my way up to
Mm-hmm.
being a director. And then she, looked at me in the eyes and said, "Actually, I think you're supposed to be a documentary person." And I said, "Wait, hold
Mm-hmm.
on. Are you sure?" And after taking that course in that class, I was like, "Yeah, she's right. I'm meant to help tell other people's stories." So Off the Field came because of that class. Um, it's a football documentary, and while this is an art podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I won't get a little too into the weeds about
Mm-hmm.
that. But um, it's not just supposed to be a football documentary. It's supposed to be a little bit of a coming of age. It's about telling this guy's story and the family kind of behind the ball, what they're doing off the field, literally,
Mm-hmm.
um, and highlighting this kind of like new culture that's coming with college and high school football, where these young kids can get $1 million deals now and not get penalized for it, which is insane,
Mm-hmm.
because you have people that are in the 16 to 18-year-old range getting $1 million deals, signing contracts
Mm-hmm.
that might hold on to them for a little while longer than they think, or might be persuading them in the wrong way, or might be tricking them a little bit. And that's an intense pressure for anyone. Like, if you're coming out of high school, you got that kind of money, or could get that kind of money, you're trying to help your family, and you're still worrying about your grades and probably what you're wearing to prom. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
intense. Um, so I want to talk to those guys, highlight their stories and what they're going through behind the ball, like off the field.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, yeah, that was going to be my next question is why a documentary? Because I feel like a lot of people don't think of that, or at least not as their first choice when they're, maybe a film
Mm-hmm.
student or, just want to make something for fun. They're like, oh, I want to, make a completely original story, and it can be about a lot of different stuff. But I feel like a lot of people don't think, oh, I want to make documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
But with our conversation and you kind of talking about, storytelling, I mean, I think it'd be a great, perfect fit for you being able to tell other people's stories and really being able to dive into it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it is a football movie, but it's not just about football, the sport. It's about the athlete and about their story and their family and kind of how it influences them. Because yeah, it's awesome being able to pay those student athletes that work so hard, and it can be a great thing. But like you said, it might be millions of dollars is nice, but in the long term, is it worth it?
Mm-hmm.
How long is that contract? So I think that'd be really interesting. Because I mean, like I talked a little bit beforehand, I'm not the biggest sports guy, but I mean that still appeals to me because I would want to know like the story of the athlete and how that can affect them. So I think while it is technically a sports documentary,
Mm-hmm.
I think it can appeal to, I mean, a wide variety of listeners, even if they, don't know a touchdown from a field goal. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, with athletes, I mean, us artists, we're out here being athletes too. Like every
Mm-hmm.
drawing, every sketch you put in, that's another rep. That's like flexing
Mm-hmm.
that creative muscle to help you get better, to make those like little cliche ties. But it's true. Like every drawing you do, every other picture you take, every, podcast that you do, like you get better and better. And it's the same thing with
Mm-hmm.
them working on the field, off the field, all of those good things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. I mean, hard work is hard
Mm-hmm.
work, and whether it be flexing your physical muscles, your mental muscles, it all takes hard work and dedication. But I also wanted to say you got interested in documentaries, but what other what films, whether it be documentaries or just other nonfiction or fiction films, kind of inspired you or some of your favorites.
Oh
Um,
man,
that you look up to?
that's one of the hardest questions you can ever ask a film person. um, I think towards the beginning, it would probably be The Help, directed by Taylor Tate. Or is it Tate Taylor? One of those directions. This is how his
One of the
name,
two. One of the
how
two.
his name goes.
Uh-huh.
It's got Octavia Spencer in it and like a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
award-winning cast. And it was one of my favorite stories when I was younger because it kind of highlighted an interesting and kind of almost funny but black experience that was going on in that like time era. I just remember watching it and thinking like, wow, I don't know, just like wow.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what else I recently watched The Good Nurse on Netflix. Um, and that one's about a nurse that goes um, killing patients basically because he can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my mom actually suggested it to me and was like, I think this is a movie you'd like because it's based off of a true story. And me being my documentarian self was like, yeah, I probably would.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched it and I was like, this is insane. I'm trying to think of some other movies that inspired me. Hmm. Hold on, you know what? I got a list somewhere on my phone of movies that I've seen before. Of course, when you ask a filmmaker this question, they either can only think of one movie or none at all.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I know there are great examples out there, but I can't think of not a single one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Here we go. Oh man, two great ones. Okay. Um, Goodwill Hunting. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but also Dead Poet
Mm-hmm.
Society. Both having, I'm pretty sure both have Robin Williams in them. Um, and I love a good movie that'll make you cry. Like, especially when I was working on narratives, I was always writing something that kind of pulled your heartstrings. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that just comes from a background of like wanting to, like, I don't know, just feel deep emotions and express those deep emotions and kind of make people cry. Because sometimes you need to cry. Sometimes you need to get that anger out, but through a very healthy way, which is movie
Mm-hmm.
watching. Um, but like Goodwill Hunting and Dead Poet Society, like the actors in it, the story behind it, especially like Dead Poet Society, just to tie back onto artists, it's like you want to express yourself, but you find yourself in a community or a family that's not fully supporting you. That's kind of what that story is at its heart about. And I love that because it kind of speaks to me in the aspects of I have a lovely family that supports everything that I'm doing because I go to art school and that's how you know. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I just know there are people that don't have that, which like sucks for me to like know that people who don't have that kind of support exist. Um, like I went to an arts middle school, high school, and now I'm in college for it. And I know there are people that don't have that opportunity but should. Um, and I said that I want to do fashion, music, and storytelling, but my fourth thing is giving back, truly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when I get out of this and I make it big and I have all the money in the world, um, I basically want to start like a nonprofit organization that helps like underprivileged youth or just kids in general, young people, young adults in general, um, succeed in art, like have a path to succeed in art, and give back to them, give scholarships, give materials and tools, whatever they would need to um, work their way up to that path of being in an artistic career. Because I just think art is so important. I've been surrounded by it all my life, so of
Mm-hmm.
course I'm a little biased, but I think I see it all around us. When the country feels divided, you see poet, you see musicians making songs, even if they're rappers, um, that make songs that pull us back together. Whether if you go to a concert, you might have different opinions about something, but you're both singing that artist's song and you're both having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at a football game, hell, like you might be the other team and I'm the other team, but like we're still having a good time watching this sport and we might shake hands at the end of it because man, that was a good catch that your team made, or man, that was a
Mm-hmm.
good tackle that your team made, or something along those lines. Um, but yeah, giving back is just important to me because of art and the community that inspires others to create it, and that it's important to society. That
Mm-hmm.
question went in six different directions, but I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was well said, bringing up the connection aspect of art, whether it be we're on different teams of some kind, or different ideal sets,
Mm-hmm.
or if we speak different languages or from different cultures. I can appreciate art from all over the world, whether it be traditional art, music, fashion, and there's so much that you can learn about those cultures or learn about that part of the world from their art. So I think it, like you said, is a great thing to kind of connect people and bring people together, because you might not see the same thing out of it, but you can still appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important thing. And then you also talked about giving back, which is definitely something in the future, once I make some make the podcast big, we're huge, and I'd love to do something similar like that, give back. One of the recent interviews I did, one that's actually coming out the week that we're recording this, this guy Henri, he does a lot of different stuff, but one of the things he recently is in the process of doing is starting a nonprofit, and he kind of talked about that and why it's important. And he's giving it back to people in his home country because they don't have the same opportunity as him. And so I think that charitable aspect, while you said it is one of the like four, five, six things that you're interested in, I mean that's definitely something I agree with, is something that I'd want to get into in the future. Um, I wanted to talk about, you talked about, movies that pull on the heartstrings. One of the movies that I watched recently, and I don't know if you've seen it, is Everything Everywhere All at
Oh, great
Once.
movie.
I watched that at the back when it came out in theaters. And whew, that movie is insane. It's in like three parts, and that last part, I was tearing up. I'm not gonna lie. It was, and the thing is, it's such a goofy movie and so weird. But if you haven't seen it yet, trust me, you're gonna see the scene where there's two rocks with googly eyes, and you're gonna be bawling. And I think that is such an important thing that shows good storytelling, is
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't have to be super serious and super sad.
Mm-hmm.
It can still be fun and really, really goofy like that movie is, but it still made me feel so
Mm-hmm.
much. Like, I don't know. I mean, I haven't watched it since it came out in theaters, but I mean, I bought the 4K Blu-ray. I don't even have a 4K player, just because that movie was so good and
Yeah.
it made me, feel something. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it because it was such a good movie. So I think that's something, the heartstrings
Yeah.
and really showing that emotion, whether it's sadness, anger, happiness, is something that I think if you invoke it from the audience, that's a really good sign of a great quality
Mm-hmm.
film. So I can't wait to see kind of how you play on that with off the field.
Yeah. I just want to piggyback on that. The Everything Everywhere All at Once. Well, two things. I saw it twice in theaters, and the second time I saw it with my
Nice.
mother, which was I
Hmm.
don't know if that was a good choice or not because we're great, but it's a movie where that relationship is not great. And so we're both
Yes.
just like
Yes.
sitting
Yes.
next to each other, just like, um, and so that
Uh-huh.
was hilarious. But I, I love that you brought that movie up because it's such a great example of so many different aspects of film coming together to make something great. Um, what I love about the film industry and just being a film major is you have so many different teams that you would never think about doing this one thing to make this like perfect product, and that's a great example. Like they have an art team. That art team had to go buy a whole bunch of googly eyes so they could put them everywhere. You
Hmm.
have a wardrobe team or someone who's working with fashion, who's dressing these people. You have the actors themselves. You have the department that is figuring out what locations to shoot at. Wherever they put those rocks, whether that was CGI or not, I'm not positive, but um, wherever they placed those rocks at, or where they shot in the laundromat, like someone had to go find that location beforehand. You got the directors that are actually working with the talent. You have the lighting team, and I got to say, the lighting team on that movie is phenomenal. I
Hmm.
think the most
Definitely.
iconic moments is when she's like traveling through time, and you kind of see the lights swirling around her face. Like someone had to build a rig that has two lights or three that swirls literally around their face while they're shooting through a camera.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a creative like scene. You have a When you're on set, you have people who are chefs who are feeding you every day.
Hmm.
You have the makeup team. You have just every other person who's helping on, like, so many teams, so many departments.
Hmm.
Um, it's a team sport. It's what football is. Back to my other tie, because you have all of these people working to make this one thing, and it comes out and it's beautiful. And you might not recognize that. Oh, the lighting team did this, or the sound department did this, or the editing team did this, but it comes together to this one beautiful thing, and it's so much fun. It's amazing. Like, it's glorious.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's important that, it's not just the director or, that, just a handful of people. It's everybody. People don't think about the talent scouts, getting the actors and getting the locations. And then, like you said, building a rig that's custom made to, fit around the camera and do the lights like that. There's so much that goes into it. I mean, if you have seen the movie, the robotics of Rakakuni and everything. There's so much that goes into it rather than just a person with the camera.
Hmm.
And so I think that's an important thing to kind of talk about is that there's so much that goes into it. And then I also wanted to just ask what is I guess the where are you in progress wise with the film?
Yeah, so we would call this the pre-production phase for Off the Field right
Mm-hmm.
now, and basically, we're still locking our talent. Locking meaning that we're just trying to secure that they are going to be the ones with us throughout the entire process, um, along with planning, scheduling, budgeting. So I think people forget a lot of the times that films cost money
Mm-hmm.
to make. Even if it's little small stuff like this, like we're hoping for our film to be maybe 15 minutes at most. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the budget for a 15-minute film could be somewhere around $12,000. And
Whew.
yeah, right, exactly. And I personally don't have $12,000.
Yes, yes, yes.
But what we do is we crowdfund, or we talk to people who are really passionate within those communities that we're making these films for, and we say, hey, we're making this really awesome thing, and with your help, basically, you can kind of like buy my crew lunch, or help us get a truck for the
Mm-hmm.
day, or help us get that lighting equipment or that camera lens that we need, or that like rig that we need so we can get that extra nice crispy slow motion of a ball being caught in the hands or something along those lines. And people look at that and they say, well, yeah, of course they want to support, and give in any way possible. But right now we're in that pre-production phase, where we're basically just like planning, making sure our schedule is on point, so that way when we are in production and we're actually shooting, it flows very well.
Nice. So then, I mean, I know you're still kind of, like you said, early in that process, but what would be the biggest piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring, maybe high school student that wants to start making, little short films with their friends? What would be like the number one piece of advice that you would tell them?
Do it. Um, not to steal from Nike, but just do it.
Uh huh. Mm-hmm.
We have the power of 4K on a device like this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you don't need, as much as I've just talked about it, you don't need a fancy equipment. You don't need, I have a DSLR that I shot an entire documentary on, which is just like a normal camera. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you don't need a giant team. You just need someone who can press record. And honestly, you don't need actors. You can go get in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
um, one of my the advice that I'm going to try to give is the advice that one of my filmmakers this quarter, my film professors this quarter, has given our class, and it's just go shoot it. Like whatever your idea is, like write the script down, get a camera, whether that be your phone or your DSLR. Practice and rehearse a few times, maybe get 3 or 4 buddies and actually shoot it. Um, you might be familiar with just like some of these film festivals, and the biggest one I think I can think of is Sundance.
Mm-hmm.
People who have won Sundance, it's not about the equipment. It's not about who has the best audio. Well, audio is pretty important, but that's besides the point. It's not about the equipment. It's about the story. It's about the characters that you're creating. It's about like if you can make someone laugh, cry, or feel something in those regards. And so just go shoot it because you never know. Your story might be the next thing that's in Sundance because you have a great
Mm-hmm.
story and you didn't worry about getting all the equipment and gear to do it. Um, it's the same thing with like YouTube. And I want to say honestly with like visual mediums like podcasts and stuff like this, it's just like, just go shoot it. Someone out there is going to tell you it's
Mm-hmm.
bad. Don't listen to them. Just keep shooting.
Like you said, it's kind of cliche, the Nike just do it, but it is the most important. I mean, I personally started, and I've talked about it a little bit before, but I had a friend that he wanted to make a podcast, and he saw some like graphics, basic graphic stuff I did for like a class project, and he's like, "Hey, I'd like for you to edit this," and I didn't know anything about editing video. I could use Photoshop a little bit, and he's like, hey, like that's okay if you want to learn. And that's kind of how I started doing like his podcast. And then after doing that for a while, I mean, I have like a nice computer just because I like to play games and stuff. But when I decided I wanted to do it, I was looking up like cameras, and I was like, well, cameras are kind of expensive for me to to start something. Like, I don't know how long I'm going to stick with it. I don't want to spend hundreds and hundreds on a camera. So I was looking at webcams. Like, okay, so there's some that I could spend like 100, 200 for like a decent one. But then I was like, why don't I just use my phone? So, I mean, that's what I'm recording with right now. It's just on like a little bendable leg tripod that was, I don't know, 10, 20
Yeah.
bucks. And then I have my phone right there because, like you said, I mean, it can record, 4Ks, 60 frames at HD. So, I mean, a lot of people, kind of overlook that you have that, pretty good quality camera and technology in your hands. Um, and then, I mean, I just have, and I'm actually recording like a behind the scenes video that I'll hopefully drop soon, but to kind of show that my setup is, I have my two monitors, but since the couch is like way back here, I moved one of my monitors up close and it's sitting on top of two books so I can see you so you're not all behind the cameras and lights. I have like two like bendable ring lights that go around so I can still see. So it's kind of, a jerry rigged system, and that's why it took me a minute beforehand to get everything set up.
Mhm.
But I mean, all I would need is my phone and a decent camera. And while I haven't done a lot of filmmaking myself, I have a friend that I mean I've known since childhood. He in high school got really into like making films, and he's into a lot of like older movies and monster films and
Mhm.
stuff. And he would always drag me into filming stuff for him. And sometimes I'd not be super excited, or we'd go film stuff in public and look like goofballs. But I mean, he just had like a little cheap little camera from his school and like his cheap laptop, and he made a ton of really cool. I mean, literally no budget for
Yeah.
those films. Or it would just be like me, him. Either he would be in the shot and I'd be recording, or vice versa. Maybe if we were lucky, we could talk like one or two people into helping us film a shot. So it was kind of cool to be able to be a part of that, really low budget filmmaking and all the stuff he was able to do. And I mean, even with those low budget, pretty basic edited films, he was able to, he got offered like a half ride scholarship to like some university in Kansas City. He ended up not going, but I mean, it was still insane that his little cheap, really basic video camera videos were able to, allow him to get that opportunity and to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very important that we kind of put that message out there, do it. Like, I mean, I know it's cliche, but, if I didn't just make the first episode, like I didn't know anybody in the art world, like I followed a bunch of people. And so I was like, just started messaging people like, hey, would you like to come on? Hey, I love your stuff. And a lot of people didn't even see the messages, didn't reply. But then I got, some people that did. And now it's built up to the point where, I have to like turn people away because I just don't have the time to make all the interviews for people. So yeah, I think that's an important thing. And I mean, I talked about it earlier, but like that snowball effect is very important. So just that hard work and just, keep at it.
Another thing is you got to think about, 100 years ago, about 100 years ago, it was really hard to make a film.
Mm-hmm.
You had actual film stock, physical pieces of paper, basically, that you had to put into a machine that was really big and really heavy and walk around with that thing and physically crank it in order to make these films. And now you don't have to do that anymore. You have the entire filmmaking industry in the palm of your hand now. And I think that's insane and crazy. So there's no reason for you to not do it, Same thing with just digital medium. Like, you might not have an Adobe subscription, but there are free programs out there that you can download. And you can start posting on that. And it costs nothing to post anything on social media. And I love that you talked about your rig, because I'm doing a very similar situation where I have two books stacked up. So you're eye level with me. My lamp is over here. It has a piece of tissue, using it to make the light a little bit softer.
Nice.
But yeah, we've got this is my mic, obviously, but like it's an interesting little rig over here too. But yeah, like there's nothing in this day and age that can stop you from doing what you want to do. Like, but maybe money. Maybe money. But if you don't have the money, there's probably 10 other ways. You're just not thinking about it.
So, I mean, yeah, that's something. I mean, yeah, the film editing, like you said, like before computers and that kind of editing, I don't even know how some of those old like effects and stuff were made with the actual physical film editing. I mean, some of that stuff seems hard to do now, and back then with, what they had to be super creative. And then I think I even talked about it on a recent episode too, but yeah, like if I wanted to make a podcast, 10 years ago, from Kansas and being able to interview people remotely, I mean, maybe I could call people up on Skype and record the audio, but other than that, I mean, I wouldn't be able to, do it with Riverside and some of the programs I use now, and, having Adobe and be able to edit, so simply. So while there is, that hurdle, especially, can be money, there is a lot of ways and, free alternatives to a lot of those programs and stuff that I use. So I think it's really important that, being creative with not just the art or what you're doing itself, but also how you do it and how you go about it is something that's really important.
For sure.
So then I guess kind of start getting to wrapping it up. I mean, you have the Off the Field coming sometime next year. And then also I'm sure busy with, just school in general. As a college student, I know how that can be. But I guess other than that, what is something that, next year, other than the film or, something that you are interested in kind of pursuing more, or kind of a goal that you have for yourself?
What is another goal besides my film? Because right now it's just graduated at this point.
yeah, I felt that last year. I felt that.
Well, I know in the art world, My friend is working on a magazine release, and that's all I can say about that because we've got some lovely little NDAs, but that's something that I'll be working on with her. Basically, eventually hosting a live event in partnership with the release of the magazine. So that'll be happening sometime next year. Um, but goal wise, I think, especially personally goal wise, I think it's just to keep working with people, like expanding my network in the same way that I do at school, either over social media, getting to talk to more people like you. Um, because you can't really do anything by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I've learned in the creative world is, you have to have other people around you. And if you don't, like, you're bound to screw up at some point. Like, it's just the inevitable truth. And yeah, I just keep making connections. I love talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
I love helping people. A lot of the like younger people who follow me on social media always hit me up and I'm like, open doors, like, let's talk about your art. One of them the other day sent me some photographs that he did and I gave him a little mini critique, and that's fun for me. That whole like giving back aspect. And I know I don't have that nonprofit right now, but I can offer my services of the 10 years, like 10 plus years at this point, of knowledge
Mm-hmm.
that I've been gaining since middle school, and give it back to people who are still, starting out or learning something along those lines. So networking would probably be my biggest goal.
I mean, yeah, definitely, trying to grow the podcast, networking is a huge thing. And I mean, that was kind of the goal originally with the podcast is like, I followed all these, cool designers and creatives and musicians. And I was like, well, I'm not really a great traditional artist. I'm, haven't really made music. And so I was like, how can I, what can I provide? What can I, how can I be a part of it? And I started, working on that podcast. And even though it was just the editing side, I was like, I have a mic, I have my phone, like I can record this. And, like I said, all I did was just message people. And,
Mm-hmm.
now some of those relationships have, built into, other episodes. Like, I've had, some people in the past be like, oh, hey, like my friend does this and this. Would you like to interview him? Or like, they'll send people my way. So, networking and like you said, especially in the creative world, you really can't do anything by yourself. And so it's important to, make those friends and those connections and those collabs. And so, I mean, that's definitely something, I hope to, expand on in the future as well. And I know it's kind of a similar question, but it's one of my favorites I love to ask is, so we talked about where you are next year, hopefully, and kind of your goals for that. And then we did talk about it a little bit beforehand, but what are your goals for the next, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Like in a perfect world, what would you be doing?
Yeah. 5 years from now, I am either a part of a production company, big or small, making documentaries still, um, but still having my hand in that fashion world, in
Mm-hmm.
that digital media world, because I don't ever plan to stop drawing. Um, 10 years from now, same thing, but just like in higher positions, like being the lead producer on these documentaries, having my own Netflix special kind of
Mm-hmm.
situation. Um, I think about, man, what was that popular one about the guy that was cheating? I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there was one Netflix film that everyone was like losing their mind about. And I'm like, yeah, trying to make something like that with one of those kinds of companies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but and like 50 years, wait, hold on. How old would I be in 50 years? About like 70. Okay. In about 50 years, I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to be in Alaska
Okay.
in a
Okay.
house talking to nobody.
That's fair.
but
That's
in
fair.
but in the nicest way possible. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I put my stamp on the world, and now I'm gonna go retreat in my little cold
Mm-hmm.
ice cave in Alaska, and I get to look at all the northern stars.
Nice.
But yeah, that's probably the career path trajectory.
Nice. So going from the Texas heat to
To the freezing
yeah,
cold.
yeah, to Alaska. Okay, that was something I definitely don't hear often when I ask that question. Is Alaska? But I respect it. I definitely. I mean, seeing the Northern Lights. That would be. I mean, that's definitely on the bucket list. So that would be pretty cool. But
I want to be a little old lady in a little cabin doing paintings.
uh-huh.
And people are talking about me on the internet because of all the great things that I've done. And, my nonprofit is already still doing
Of
great
course,
and
of course,
amazing
of
things.
course.
I'm probably not I'm the CEO, but I'm never there, but I'm only
Yeah,
called back
yeah,
when I need to be.
yeah.
But I'm in Alaska doing
Mm-hmm.
my little paintings of the Northern
Mm-hmm.
Lights.
Nice. Okay, it does sound pretty nice when you talk about it. But I mean, I guess lastly, I mean, shout out your socials, and I mean, if there's anything else you kind of wanted to say before we wrapped up.
Yeah. Well, my name is Hales. It's at HAILSJSPH, either art, film. There's probably some more in there that I can't think
Mm-hmm.
of, but like once you type that in, you can find all of my social medias from there. It branches out. Um, and like parting words, I don't know, just like keep being great. Everyone who decided to listen to this, like sometimes it's hard, and I feel like we listen to things like this when things get hard or we need a little bit more inspiration. But just like keep doing you, keep being great, keep achieving, because like you can only go one direction, and at least in my opinion, and that's
Mm-hmm.
up.
Well said. And I mean, like I said, thank you for taking the time out and coming on the show and, kind of talking a little bit about yourself and, hopefully inspiring the listeners of the show. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Colton. I appreciate it.